Hello, everybody. This is Emily Robertson Arès from Robertson Arès Gallery, and we're here today with a really fun interview with Emily Filler and Joseph Coniff, who right now at the gallery are working on a duo exhibition titled Managing Flowers. How are you guys?
Good, thank you.
Doing well, yeah, thanks.
So tell us a little bit about working together. I think that both of you actually communicated quite a bit for the show, and you both wanted cohesive exhibition. So you guys came up with a concept, a title. Tell us a little bit about that. Joseph, you go first.
Okay, I'll go first. So we excuse the dog.
He's
Dog
part of the
barking
fun.
every now and again. We communicated, I think, first over Instagram, just about some initial ideas for the title, something that would maybe would fit with both of our thinking for these series of works that we're going to be shown together. And if I remember correctly, I think that I have an ongoing list of titles. So I kind of took some from that list that were relevant, that I thought were relevant, and sent them over to Emily. I believe that's how it started. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. And I am terrible with titles, and so I was very pleased with this list. And then we just discussed which ones we liked the most, and we talked initially too about, like, we're familiar with each other's work, so sort of like what kinds of pieces are you making, but we never got into too many specifics about, like, I don't know, about like specific colors or specific imagery. It was more like an abstract, like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you're doing some paper things, you're doing some canvas things. There's always like a collage element to both of our works. So we knew we had that in common. And then Joseph also, I thought it was so cool how he added, like, he's done floral work too, but I'm a really big fan of his like purely abstract stuff. And so, but it was also fun to see him kind of like merge the two together, which I thought was really nice. Like, those panel pieces are so nice. And yeah, we would, but most of we never actually had a chat. We were modern people and we communicated over Instagram.
And just also let everybody know that Emily is currently in Toronto, Ontario, and Joseph is in Denver, Colorado.
And we're in Montreal.
And we're in Montreal. Miracles of the modern world.
So tell us a little bit about, obviously, Emily, you've always, for the years that we've been working together, you've always been working with flowers, and Joseph has had many different series. But Emily, this was also an opportunity for you to, I think, bring it up a notch and start with like the sculptures and the vases, which I thought, I loved seeing how you pushed the concept further to create the sculptures, while Joseph came up with like the concept of the flowers. How did it feel to be working with sculptural elements?
It was interesting and challenging for me because I hadn't done any sculptures really since university, and I had done a couple that I for fun, like every once in a while, if I have a week to spare, I'll start some new project at the studio. But sometimes these projects are like a personal experiment, you know what I mean? Like, I don't intend on showing them all the time. And then you guys had seen them and liked them, and so I thought for this I wanted to make them a little more polished, if that's like a little, there was certain elements of them where it was like a bunch of stuff I just found in my studio and put it in, you know, where for this I planned a bit more, and I wanted them to look a little more like I was a little more conscientious of the composition, the colors. It was less of a like, I wonder how this will work. Instead, I was taking that concept of sort of like a prototype I had made and refining it in some way. But it was wild. And there was times where I was like, there's a reason I'm a painter. but it was definitely interesting to take a subject matter I've tackled for so many years and put it in a different, like 3D or whatever, or is that right? Different dimensions. I'm used to a 2D surface. And so, is that right? Do I sound, I'm so, as I'm saying that, I'm like, oh my God. But it's an interesting way, compositionally, it's just so different. And so it's helpful to see things from all angles. It was a fun challenge.
I actually found that the vases in many ways are just like pushing the idea of collage a little bit further outside of the surface of the canvas. You're bringing the 3D element of collage, just pushing it a little bit further.
Well, because you can break your brain, right? You can be like, flower arranging is like collage, like a florist is a collage collage is such a I think open to so many interpretations that you can consider this sort of like, an extension of collage, which was fun. Yeah. Because I even try with my painting sometimes to like raise the paint a bit in certain areas to kind of create like a sculptural quality on the canvas. But this way I was like, oh, look. But then you have to be, it's a little more challenging because you have to consider things. Some things that would look amazing from one angle don't always look amazing from every angle. So that was something I had to consider more than, with the painting.
Well, I actually really like the fact that like the flowers, they don't, like you've created a really specific arrangement. It's not like I can move it around, shake it, and then create my own arrangement. Like these flowers are very purposefully each in their spot. And if a collector were to come and see, like they would see that's kind of that's the final composition. I love that attention to the composition and to those really just placing that flower just so. And I was thinking about how, like if you were really into real flower arrangements, to have that capacity to for the flowers never to die, for the flowers to always have that very perfect whimsical placement. I was thinking like how beautiful it actually was. It's very poetic once you see them in person.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I started out thinking, okay, I'll make it such that you can arrange this yourself. And then as I was working, I was so, I guess like all artists are very particular about their vision. And I'm like, no, I am arranging this. And this is how it's going to be. Because the way the wires are, you can create these sort of like really beautiful shapes. And I wanted to maintain that as opposed to sort of like leaving it up to chance. I wanted it to be more intentional.
Well, speaking of like leaving things to chance, I think that someone who does not leave anything to chance is Joseph.
Oh yeah.
And so your work was like just hyper like thought through, whereas I feel like sometimes Emily's work has a little bit of a like sort of letting the flowers kind of explode like a wild garden, and you were a bonsai. I didn't think I was going to go so deep in the plant analogy. That's as far as it goes. So tell us about your process.
Yeah, so the each of the compositions were, like you said, were thought out in advance. These are the imagery is printed on canvas, which is something I've never done before. And I wanted to.
Amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, and that was its own learning process of figuring out like what type of canvas to print on, because they're stretched on panel and adhered, and then with the edges wrapping around the side of the panel. I ran into issues with various canvases being, like too thick or too thin. So that was a process in itself. So I had to create all of the compositions ahead of time so that I could then send, the correct portion of each of the large, they came from larger images, send the correct portion to be printed, and then transfer that onto the panel. And then all of these started with the, I guess the basic idea from the collages in the exhibition, which I've been making for years now. And then decided that I wanted to make them more into like a three-dimensional wall sculpture type of piece based on the smaller collage works.
What would you say, like your intention here in for the viewer, so that we're looking at it and you've got a hint of what we're supposed to see? Where I'm filling out the image myself that it's a flower, it's a bouquet of flowers. You have it looking out. In almost all of the works, we have this reoccurring theme. So what is it? What are you hinting at?
Yeah. So these I think of it as like masking, or just the relationship between these two panels, the imagery with the solid blocks of color, from, I guess, like more of like a metaphorical, from a like metaphorical sense, the large blocks of color or large shapes act as like, for me, I was thinking of like built environments, manufactured environments, and then the printed areas being naturally occurring elements or objects or materials, and that relationship between the two created with this combining of and merging of the two, which if you think of, we were just hearing how Emily was talking about sculpture as collage. I think that's one of the amazing things about collage is you can think about it in such a broad sense of like like where it's basically where just like two materials or two things come together, and they become like one environment, I guess. So I think of something like a sidewalk running into a patch of grass, and that relationship between these two very different materials, objects, creating an environment. And if you zoom in or like crop in on just those, that can be a composition in itself, these two elements coming together. And that's essentially what I was thinking with these collages first, and then on into the larger, I consider them paintings. They're wall sculptures. They have a lot of overlap between sculpture, painting, collage, and I wanted to make sure that showed, and they weren't just like one. They had multiple, I guess, like planes. It just wasn't like a flat 2D surface.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting that you would even ask that question, Francois, because I was just having a conversation yesterday with a client. We were discussing your work, Joseph, and she was saying, but I don't know what the rest of the image is. And it was almost like, I don't want to use the term anxiety too lightly, but she was like, but I don't know what the rest is. And I feel like like the fact that you would mention that something that never really dawned on me. I think it's like it's two different types of brains, of like the brains that like wonder what's missing and the brains that like just accept it. I don't know what that says about me, but I feel like it was very interesting that like that for her there was something that she's like, but what am I not seeing? And I love that idea of the sunlight and the grass and those miniature like compositions, and just thinking about it in a much more abstract way. Did you ever think about, Joseph, like what's the unseen?
Yeah, definitely. I think about that all the time. I mean, there so much is unseen. I mean, you like if we're sticking with like natural elements. I mean, only a portion of a tree is seen, the rest is underground. Maybe if it's in proximity to a building, part of it's around the corner. Those types of observations are what sparked, I get, an interest in trying to create something that kind of like encapsulates that idea. I guess the some of that I guess, yeah, like you said, anxiety is like a little strong of a word, but it can be like we want like resolve, I guess, a lot of times, and by not having that resolve, it's I guess that's why I think I have the desire to make a series of work addressing that, because there is like this level of like unknown, it's like anything masked, unseen is of intrigue, I guess, because we can't, it's not immediate, we can't have it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that idea of lack of resolve and just like sometimes thinking and overthinking things does make me think of the art world in general, where that's almost all of our jobs, is to overthink certain concepts and certain colors. And one of the things that we see often in the art world, like in the contemporary art world, is that there's certain things that are expected of contemporary artists. And we'll see that a lot at art fairs, where Francois and I will set up a booth and people will be saying, oh, you guys are so colorful for contemporary art gallery. Like in contemporary art, you're not supposed to have too much color, or you're not supposed to have any humor in the artwork, or are you supposed to even have flowers? And do you feel that there's a little bit of a taboo about painting flowers? Emily, I'll go to you.
Well, it sounds, I don't expect anyone to get this from looking at my work, but I sort of consider, especially as a woman, which I don't even like, when people are like, as a woman artist, but like, I consider it almost a rebellious act to pursue my desire to work with this subject matter. Because over the years, I've had people tell me, well, you have a very good eye, or you're very blah, blah, blah. You have a nice, like, handling of paint or whatever. You should try doing something else. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do something else. You know what I mean? Like, or if I paint, like I've done some abstract pieces and people are like, oh, now that's, And I've often, how do I put it? It's like, after a certain amount of years, especially too, because I don't even try to consider it in the way I handle them anymore. I used to think like, maybe, okay, I shouldn't use these colors, or I should like change the, like, it shouldn't be just, here are these flowers, you know what I'm saying? Like it maybe I would rough things up or skew things a bit. And then I'm too, after a certain amount of years, you just don't care anymore. And people, and I think that the best work comes from doing what feels the most sincere to you. So this is like the most, for now, like I like to evolve. I work in different series, but for me, this is like an authentic, that's an overused word, authentic, but like representation of me, what I'm like, what I want to put out there. And I don't really, like when Joseph talks about that interpretation of his work, I was like, so like, oh my God, like I never considered that, you know, like with the sidewalk and the grass, the fabricated and the natural. It's like, it's such a beautiful interpretation, but I can enjoy his work not knowing that. And it makes me like it even more knowing it, but I don't need to know that. And that's how I feel about my work. Like, I don't mind if you just take it at face value and you don't really know what I'm trying to do with it. That's fine with me. And I almost kind of get a kick out of it at this point, that if somebody's like, oh, flowers, like I'm like, yeah, flower, you know. So but I understand that is it's sometimes how people view those things, you know, like maybe it's not as like high end a subject matter or something, or like arty. I'll be right back. One sec. Peter got me this book yesterday. So this is so nice. He gave me this as a gift. I'm not gonna. It's nothing but flowers. Oh. It's so many artists. It's so beautiful. And there's so many fantastic, like very fancy artists in this book. And the work is so wide ranging to like hyper representational, just super abstract. And I don't know. Yeah, I ramble, so the original question is getting foggy, but I think that if you want to pursue a certain subject matter, regardless of what anyone thinks about it, that's what you should do. Does that make sense?
When I'm talking to collectors about your work, when they come in, people are often they're just captivated by like the colors and how powerful that it's going to draw somebody in. And I often tell them that like the vase and the bouquet itself are secondary to the use of color, complements, contrasts, and then also with form, like all of the different forms that you're putting to create this collage. And then they step back, and then they're going to see the more abstract composition that you're putting together. And then it's like it clicks for them, like, oh, okay, I really now see where she's going with the depth of what she's talking about. And it's no longer just a bouquet.
Oh, sure, yeah. Like I sort of got into this subject matter because it is close to me personally, but also because I love putting things together as the nature of collage, and color is like my two favorite things to do, put things together and deal with colors. And I just didn't have entirely the patience to do purely abstract things, because I think that anyone who can pull that off, Joseph, is a genius. Like to be able to I don't know, I wanted to sort of like provide a certain parameter, or like restrain myself in some ways. Do you know what I mean? To create these compositions. So if you pick a subject matter and you're sort of like creating an abstracted version of that, how do I put it? It like takes a little bit of the heat off of thinking about your abstract composition. You use these elements to create your composition, but I'm not really as concerned, like, does this look like a realistic bouquet of flowers? Like, is this, you know, it's more, I love this color, I love this shape next to this, you know? It is like using a real subject matter, but I almost think of them somehow, even though I know they're not abstract paintings, a little bit like abstract paintings.
One of the things that I often tell people who come here is how every time I see your pieces, I think about how much they look like your personality. Like I feel like we started working with you before meeting, and when I met you a couple of years ago, I made me like the pieces so much more, because I hear you, I see you, I see the energy of the studio, and I think a little bit in the same way, where I see a lot of Joseph in your work too. I think about like whenever you and I, Joseph, are having a conversation on the phone, I'm like always like blah 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 blah. I'm cutting you off, and then you're just trying to like calmly explain that story to me. And like your work, it's just like I feel like when we were talking about the unseen, it's like a conversation between you and me. It's like me not even letting you like say the full stories. It's like there's the unseen. But how was it, Joseph, for you, like working with, to me, what felt like a very different subject matter, but for you is not?
Well, sorry, I'm trying to contain this little animal.
Everybody?
I think the only way is to I think I'm just gonna hold him the whole time.
Blends with your t-shirt. We don't even see him.
Oh, good. Yeah. This is Books. Say hi. So I feel that going back to the question, like new subject matter was the question. And so I guess I've been working on these collages and just thinking about kind of this just general thought of this relationship of kind of these two poles like coexisting, this like manufactured kind of constructed man-made versus like organic naturally occurring type materials. I've been thinking about that relationship for a long time, so I don't necessarily feel it's like it's new for me. I've definitely, while making these the paintings, I've been thinking about it a lot more, I guess, in different ways. And it's I mean, it's the kind of thing where there's no solution or answer. It's just kind of like, it's just the way things are. I guess I am hyper aware now, you know, when I go on a walk, like with this guy, I see things that I wouldn't have seen before, which I love that. Subtle, these like subtle relationships between like two different worlds, I guess you could think of them, and how they're affecting each other in a negative and then also in a positive way at times. So that's something that I always enjoy when, and I think that anyone who makes things, comes to these new areas of thinking and realization, and it really is nice. It helps, your day-to-day life. You notice new things, and then from that it springboards to new areas of thinking. And that's kind of how, at least with my practice, it just, everything is linked, and it might not be incredibly obvious, but there's that link of, continuous, I guess, thinking about various subject matters, and then they veer off in one direction, and a new series of work might come about, and then from that another series. So I to answer the question, I don't feel it's new, but it's new in a different way. If that makes sense.
How do you feel about the stigma that's attached to the idea of flowers in art and contemporary art?
I don't really, sorry, I'm feedback going on. Is that better?
Yeah, that works.
Okay, cool. I guess I don't really think about it too much. The for me, I think it's the best use of from like the standpoint of like thinking, metaphorically or like an example of something that is naturally occurring. It's like I guess it's not always like the bloom of a flower of a plant. It can be other aspects of a plant, but like Emily said, one of my favorite things is working with color. So that's like a pretty obvious choice that you would use like the bloom of a plant, a flower, in the imagery, because green is lovely in all its variations, but it's nice to have the other spectrum, the other colors in the spectrum as well.
I find like the whole conversation of the stigma of creating flowers and contemporary art and how people have like a judgment called to be a little bit absurd. Like some of the most famous pieces of art are of flowers. Like
yeah,
Keith Warhol. Like we could go on naming hundreds and hundreds of famous artworks. So actually, really, what I like about flowers is something that. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it's just such a versatile subject matter. Like you never exhaust all the ideas that you can put into that subject or interpretations of it. Do you know what I mean? Like people have been using this as a subject matter forever, and you still see new interpretations. I'm very moved by people's interpretations of it, even still, like you can still create something completely new with something that we've seen over and over again.
Of course. And like that's to me one of the most important aspects of being an artist, right? Is to give people the ability to recontextualize, give a new filter on how to look at things. So yeah, people have been painting, for example, skulls for hundreds of years, but there are people who are interpreting that now and they're giving us new interpretations. For example, like the classic Damien Hirst with the diamonds. Like that made it an explosive onto the art scene when it came out, and yet it's a subject matter that's been revisited multiple times throughout the last 500, 600, 700 years. So anyhow, I feel it the same way with flowers, is that it's a subject matter that comes up, and those reinterpretations are what makes art beautiful.
Next show, flowers and skulls.
Yeah, that's it.
And dust.
That's it. Next time we want paintings with diamond dust, guys. Lots of diamond dust. Throw in some Marilyns and then we're good. So here we're going to get into some of the images of your vases, Emily. So I really like the arrangements on how, in contrast to your paintings where you've got these massively stuffed bouquets, like explosions of textures and colors, and then you have these very minimal bouquets, like 4 flowers just sticking out, or in one of them there's just one flower that's
yeah.
But that was an interesting exploration for you.
It's just watching this, you can tell that I am a hyper sort of frenetic individual and Joseph is a calm, peaceful individual. And when you were talking about his work and then just a piece, I was like, yeah, because he shows a great amount of restraint. Like I really admire, I think you can admire all kinds of things, even if that's not what you personally do. And I really admire, it's surprising given how much stuff I pack into my own work, a really clean, calm composition. And I think that I was like Emily and didn't even really notice that anything was missing. To me, I was like, oh, that's just like a beautiful, like collaged thing brought together. And so I cannot help myself with the paintings. I just love going for it. And with the bouquet sculptures, I had gone for it a couple times, and then I realized I think that part of collage is not just the addition, but the like removal too of things. And so as I removed things and just observed, like, okay, if you add these, if you remove these, if you did it, to me, this was the best end result, just visually, was to take a bit away. So I actually started with more and then took stuff away. And then when I did the single one, I was even having a conversation with myself. I'm like, a single flower? But then I was like, no, that's the best, because the vase to me on that one was that was really exciting to make. The vase had so much going on that I just wanted the flower to be like monochromatic and sparse and just, the single. But I had all sorts of different interpretations before I stuck with what I finished with.
This one right here seems to be very popular with people coming in. This vase, this bouquet of flowers.
This is the one that's got the most in it. But it was the last one I did. So sometimes I don't know, it's hard when you talk to artists. Like, I'd be curious what Joseph thinks about this. Like, when you start a new series, every once in a while, the first thing I do in that is the one I like the best. But sometimes as I work through, the last one becomes my favorite because I'm sort of resolving things as I go. So I don't know. I sort of like them all for different reasons. But this one was the last one I did. I don't know if that has anything. I kind of got a little more comfortable. When I was first doing this, I had no idea what I was doing. And it was like, just every day was discovering new things and figuring it all out. And so this one, I like this one. I don't know if we're all looking at the same thing. I'm assuming we are. The black and white one. I love that one. And then when I started to see them, it was really fun in the studio when I started to see them, because you only have so much room in a studio, especially in downtown Toronto. When I would finish them and put them up against, like, in front of a painting, I loved the interaction. And then I started thinking, oh my gosh, I started doing crazy things. Like, I would take a piece of like a 3D flower and like be like, what if I just sewed it onto the canvas? And then I was like, stop, you have to control yourself. But I think it's a project. All of my projects kind of build and build and build and build. Like, I started doing paper collages, and then I started collaging with canvas, and then now this, and then I started thinking I'm gonna make a sculptural painting, and then I don't know, don't stress, I might not do that if it's too overkill.
I'm excited by the possibility.
I'm thinking, oh my God, tipping.
But I tend to, I think a lot of it, like Joseph was saying, when he says when you watch like on a walk, you just pay attention to what's going on. I think a lot of my discoveries in the studio are just sort of sitting around being like, oh yeah, I really like that, how that scrap on the floor, like, you know what I mean, is sitting on a painting accidentally. And then it was like with these, I thought, I'm like, I would have a fixed composition, and then I would see something, like I'd see maybe red in a painting behind the bouquet, and then be like, no, it needs a red flower. You know what I mean? You kind of, it was mostly through trial and error, these in particular, because they were brand new for me as an experiment.
I'm very excited to see where you're going to go with this across the years here.
Mm-hmm.
Very excited to see you sew flowers into your face.
Here we have some of Joseph's collage work coming up on the screen here. I love how delicate these are, Joseph, and the fact that there's like that nice, the subject matter, flowers are delicate, and these collage works are very delicate as well. And when you're putting them together, tell us a little bit about your collage work right now.
Yeah, so like I was saying, I have been, for years now, just been making these small, they're always just two elements, a printed element and a solid piece of paper as the second element. They started with actually Derek Velasquez, who shows with the gallery. Him and I were doing a collage, kind of like a hangout collage night for a while, and like this was years ago. And that was the first time I made one of these. And I, like Emily mentioned, just like having stuff around. I guess it depends on what project I'm working on. Sometimes there can be tons of stuff around, but I generally have a series of large contained boxes of like scraps that I can then dump out and then put back in the box and contain. So I just had a, it's like when you make collage, or anything really, you just have leftovers. And collage in particular, working with paper and images, sometimes you could spend an hour like trying to cut out and find like a great like little composition or something that can be added to a collage. You could spend a ton of time trying to do that when like it's actually just like sitting on the table or like on the floor or something. So these started out with just like some remnant scraps that I try to keep, knowing that I try to keep most of everything like scrap wise that's like sizable at least. So yeah, I found a few of those, and then sometimes it's hard to go back to like my thinking, like why did I have like a huge stack of just solid paper, and I just did, and it happened to be there, and I just like was putting them together, and I was like, I think at that point is when I was like, yeah, this is kind of like two different worlds merging, like something very rigid and like planned versus like organic and like free form. And then just started to the fun part of just like creating compositions, like thinking about how you can like how I could create movement within these two shapes, like orchestrate some like type of balance based on maybe like the flower, like the petals or the leaves or grass or whatever's in the imagery is like pulling your eye, like in this one it's pulling it to the top left, but you've got this large mass on the bottom that is like pulling you down, and like that that relationship of this large like white mass at the bottom having like even though it's white, it has like a lot of weight. So like thinking about just basic design, compositional aspects, and how to build a composition. That's my favorite thing is that, and the use of colors, building compositions and trying to like do something that I guess like is like stimulating for my eye to be involved in, when looking at it.
Well, it's a beautiful series of work. The exhibition is currently on until June 3rd. We have a number of pieces both by Joseph and Emily on view. Here we have a couple of Emily Filler's famous paper bouquets with the use of these old letters. This one's dated from 1913, Emily. One of the little treasures that you found to Miss E-Bag.
I'm starting to worry because I have a letter lately that was from like 1922, and I'm like, oh man, it's now you know what I mean? Like I've reached past the 100 years, and I was like, are people going to be like, oh yeah, this thing from 5 years ago, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's those are particularly fun, the letters, because sometimes I get stuck in the studio like reading the letters, you know? And weirdly, a lot of the letters I've gotten were from the same two people, like corresponding back and forth. I guess they saved all their letters, and then it's sort of heartbreaking to put them in things, but I guess they get to live on now. But oh yeah, it was so interesting. Like, why haven't you visited? I haven't heard from you. This is what Christmas was like. Like, it's so neat. And so it's one of the elements. I'd like to sort of, you know, root around for things. Like I'm not necessarily always, I don't go to like a paper store and just buy all these papers. I kind of come across them. I acquired the letters from a friend who's a vintage dealer. I sometimes like root around at flea markets. Some of the paper, I won't say what of the paper it was, I begged a famous department store here in Toronto has a certain gift wrap that I love. And I was like, can I have like 40 sheets of this tissue paper? And they're like, no, ma'am, no. And then I went to a different department and I showed on Instagram what I made. And then the woman's like, oh my God, I love these. Take as much as you want. You know, so it's like you kind of get, it's like it comes at different places. You just have to be pay attention. Like I think as an it's really interesting to hear another collage artist talk about this stuff, because when he was like the perfect, I try to cut this thing and then the perfect thing is on the floor or whatever, I was like, oh yes, the perfect thing is never. The hardest time for me to collage is when, because I work with a printmaker, I take all this imagery to him and we choose the colors and a lot of it is silk screened. The hardest time for me to make these works is when he delivers the paper and it's all perfectly laid out in a box and I've got every color to choose from and they're all full sheets of paper and I'm like, where are the weird chunks that help me? You know what I mean? Like the weird chunks that you just, so whenever I get a fresh box, I have the most mental block. And then whenever I'm really running low and I think I can squeak out a few more out of this batch of papers that I have, or like I'm always continually replenishing. If I'm trying to squeak out a few, those sometimes are the best ones, because it's like I had to somehow come up with something with whatever I had. And so these are a mix of all sorts of papers I see on the way to the studio. When I visit friends, I've stolen things from people's baby showers. I've, you know, like, to me, if I like it visually, I don't care where it came from. And so, and then I keep all this stuff like Joseph in a contained vessel, like a box. And then when I want to make these, I sort of
not contained at all. This is a lot.
No, I clean up, I swear.
The box.
But I dump it all on the floor. Yeah, maybe some of my studio shots with them all dumped on the floor. Then the guy who will print them for me, who like meticulously tries to keep the paper all nice, he'll text me being like, so I saw your Instagram, like what is happening over there? And I'm like, oh, you know, it's part of the process. But so some of these pieces are saved for, you know, you kind of use up what's in the box and add more things to the box. And some of the things in the box have been there for like 10 years. And you think one of these days I will find the perfect thing for you, little piece of paper. And even sometimes the thing that you like, I have this theory, like you could take like a color that's really off-putting or a pattern that's really off-putting, but if you put it next to something, the right thing, it suddenly becomes beautiful. So there are things I hold on to that I'm like, I really don't like this, but then that might be the perfect thing in a piece to finish it off, you know? I don't throw out, I keep all kinds of random scraps.
And isn't that how they make perfumes too? Like a perfume has to have like all these good smells, but it has to have like
I'll have a few
smell for it to like be the perfect scent.
I did.
Yes, it's true. They add a few like kind of off-putting scents in there, they do.
We learn all kinds of
I know
things.
Francois doesn't look convinced.
With Robertson Arès.
Well, thank you so much for both of you for engaging in this conversation with us. I think it's always really a treat to be able to have like a face-to-face with our artists and just be able to share this with the world. So thank you so much for joining, and have a wonderful day, Emily and Joseph. And we really look forward to seeing you really soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.